Yesterday, Meghan Markle blew out 45 candles on a birthday cake. That is the number in every caption, the number on every news ticker, and the number that newspapers on both sides of the Atlantic printed without a second thought. But within hours, thousands of comments flooded royal-focused channels, social media threads, and fan forums with people doing what they seem to do every single August. They counted the years for themselves, and they ended up with a completely different answer. Now, I am not going to tell you what to believe. What I am going to do is lay out every publicly available document, every legal filing, every family account, every published interview, and one specific quote from Meghan herself that almost nobody discusses in full, and let you see the picture that forms when you put them all side by side. Because when I did that, I noticed something I genuinely did not expect. And by the end of this, you will understand why one question, a question that could settle this debate overnight, has apparently never been asked in public to the one person who was in the delivery room. Every August, like clockwork, the same debate resurfaces. The Duchess of Sussex celebrates her birthday. The official record says August 4th, 1981, and within hours, comment sections across the internet light up with people comparing dates, pulling out old magazine pages, and citing family members who seem to remember things differently. This has been happening for years. It is not a fringe conspiracy confined to anonymous accounts. Biographers have examined it, published fact-checkers have addressed it, legal filings have been scrutinized because of it. And Tom Bower, one of the most prominent biographers in Britain, once said something about Meghan Markle's half-sister, Samantha Markle, that I think applies here. He said, "Look, we all laughed at Samantha, and she was right, and everything she said has come true." That is a direct quote from a man who has spent decades investigating public figures for a living, and it sets the stage for what I am about to walk you through. Because this is not about a typo on a Wikipedia page. When you look at the full range of publicly available sources, you find a book that lists a different birth date, a legal filing that uses an age gap that does not quite add up, a private email made public in court that appears to confuse the ages of siblings, a magazine from 1997 that lists a completely different birth year, and a published fact check that openly acknowledges inconsistencies in the timeline. Those are not random internet rumors. Those are documents, and documents leave a trail. Let me walk you through the evidence piece by piece, because the details matter more than most people realize, and each one adds a thread to a pattern that becomes very hard to ignore once you see the full weave. Start with Samantha Markle's book. Samantha is Meghan's half-sister, born in November of 1964, roughly 17 years before Meghan's widely reported birth. In her book, which she has described as her effort to set the record straight about her family, Samantha describes Meghan's arrival using a vivid line about the great migration of genes, bringing the ship Meghan Flower to dock at their house. And then she includes a specific date, August 31st, 1981. Now, the year matches the official record, 1981. There is no reason to dismiss that, but the day does not match. The widely reported and officially recorded birthday is August 4th. Samantha's book says August 31st. That is a gap of 27 days. Whether it is a simple error of memory, a mistake by a copy editor, or something else entirely, the discrepancy has caught people's attention and it has never been publicly explained. Next comes the legal filing. In court documents connected to a lawsuit involving Samantha Markle, a reference appears to a 17-year age difference between the two women. That number has been cited repeatedly by people who believe it confirms the official timeline. But look closer. If Samantha was born in November of 1964 and Meghan was born in August of 1981, the actual gap is 16 years and approximately 8 months, not 17 years. Not even close to 17 years. It is a rounded number, and rounding in a legal filing is not unusual, but it is also not precise. And in a debate where precision is the entire point, that gap between the stated number and the actual arithmetic has become another piece that people continue to discuss. Then there is the email. In 2018, Meghan wrote a private email to her father, Thomas Markle, that was later made public during the Mail on Sunday court proceedings. In that email, she described her father's other children as being 15 and 17 years older than her when their parents separated. But publicly reported information places Samantha as the older sibling and Thomas Jr. as the younger. The ages in the email appear to assign the larger number to the younger sibling and the smaller number to the older one. The fact-checkers who reviewed these details in their published analysis acknowledged the issue with specific wording. They wrote that the ages were clearly slightly confused. That phrase has become part of the discussion because it is a formal fact-checking outlet confirming that at least some of the timeline details Meghan presented were not completely consistent, even while reaching its broader conclusion. And then there is the magazine. A copy of 17 magazine published in March of 1997. In it, Meghan Markle is described as being 21 years old at the time of publication. If that were accurate, her birth year would fall around 1976, not 1981. That is not a one-year discrepancy. That is a 5-year gap. Now, magazines make errors. Profiles get details wrong. But this is the kind of detail that someone providing information for their own feature would typically catch, and it has been circulated and debated every year since it resurfaced. So, here is the scorecard. The official birth record says August 4th, 1981. A family member's book says August 31st. A legal filing rounds up an age gap in a way that does not match the calendar. A private email mixes up sibling ages. A 1997 magazine lists a birth year 5 years earlier. And a fact-checking outlet acknowledged inconsistencies while still reaching its conclusion. That is not one anomaly. That is a pattern of small fractures in a timeline that people keep expecting to be seamless. Now, before I go any further, I need to address the alternative theory directly, because dismissing it without examining it is not analysis. And neither is accepting it without stress, testing it against the publicly reported facts. The theory that circulates online every summer, and has done for years, suggests that Meghan Markle was not born in 1981 at all, but in 1976 or 1977. Supporters of this idea point to the 17 magazine listing, to comments attributed to former classmates, and to their own interpretations of photographs and timelines. The theory is not new, and it is not going away. So let us examine what happens when you lay it against the publicly reported family timeline and see whether it holds together or falls apart. According to widely published accounts, Thomas Markle and Doria Ragland had not yet met in 1976. Meghan herself has publicly described how her parents met in the late 1970s while her father was working as a lighting director on a television production and her mother was doing temporary work at the same studio. Multiple reports describe a relationship that moved quickly, lasting about 6 months before they married. Their wedding is widely reported to have taken place on December the 23rd, 1979, at a temple on Sunset Boulevard in Los Angeles, with a monk officiating the ceremony. Reports also state that Doria was 23 and Thomas was 35 at the time. Now, compare the two timelines side by side. The widely reported version says the parents met in 1979, married that December, and welcomed their daughter in August of 1981, roughly 19 months after the wedding. Everything fits together in a straightforward sequence. The alternative theory, claiming a birth in 1976 or 1977, would place the birth 2 to 3 years before the reported timeline says the parents even met. That is not a small discrepancy. That is not a rounding error or a confused memory. It is a structural conflict between the theory and the established public record. If the birth happened in 1977, then either the parents met years earlier than every published account says, or the entire courtship, wedding, and birth sequence described publicly by Meghan herself and reported by multiple outlets would have to be fundamentally rewritten. That does not mean the alternative theory is automatically wrong. It means that if it were true, it would require far more than adjusting a single date. It would require rethinking the entire publicly reported family origin story, and that is a much bigger claim than most people making it seem to realize. Which brings me to the part of this story that I find the most fascinating and the most unsettling. Because through all of these documents, all of these debates, all of these comment sections and biographies and court filings, one voice has been almost entirely absent. And it is the voice of the one person who, by definition, would have the most direct, firsthand, undeniable knowledge of when this birth actually happened. Doria Ragland, Meghan Markle's mother, the woman who, according to every published account, was not waiting outside or by a telephone, but in the delivery room at West Park Hospital in Canoga Park in California's San Fernando Valley on the day her daughter was born. Now think about what I just said. Not a father remembering a date from memory years later. Not a half-sister recalling a family event based on her own timeline. Not a classmate comparing yearbook photos. The woman who gave birth. The person whose body went through labor, whose arms received the child, whose experience of that day is as firsthand as any human memory can possibly be. For most mothers, the birth of a first child is one of the most vivid, most remembered, most precisely dated events of their entire lives. They remember how old they were, they remember the hospital, they remember the time of day. It is the kind of memory that does not blur easily. And yet, in all the years this debate has raged, through all the books, all the documentaries, all the newspaper investigations, all the Netflix episodes, all the biographies, all the legal proceedings, all the published fact checks, has Doria Ragland ever been publicly asked, on camera or on the record, to confirm her daughter's birth year? Has anyone, any journalist, any interviewer, any biographer sat across from her and said, "Can you tell us the date your daughter was born?" Because as far as I can find, and I have looked carefully, the answer is no. Nobody has publicly asked her. And that, to me, is the most extraordinary detail in this entire story. Not the inconsistencies in the documents, not the magazine listing, not the rounded legal filing. The fact that the one person who could settle every question with a single sentence has apparently never been asked the question. And here's what makes the silence even more striking. Doria Ragland is not someone who has stayed completely out of the public eye. She is not a recluse who refuses all media contact. In December of 2022, she took part in a widely viewed public interview. She appeared on camera, spoke at length, and opened by saying that the last 5 years had been challenging and that she was ready to have her voice heard. Those were her words. Ready to have her voice heard. She went on to discuss the phone call where Meghan told her she was going out with Prince Harry, the Duke of Sussex. She spoke about race, about personal regrets, about media attention, about moments when she felt physically unsafe. She covered deeply personal territory. She had a global audience, professional cameras, experienced interviewers, and what appeared to be an extended and unhurried format. She discussed topics that most private individuals would never dream of addressing publicly. And yet, in that interview, no one appears to have asked her when her daughter was born. No one asked her to confirm the year. No one asked her how old she was when she gave birth. No one put the question to her directly, despite the fact that this debate had been raging in public for years by that point, and she had explicitly said she was ready to speak. Now, I want to be careful here. There are many possible explanations. The question may not have been part of the agreed topics. The interviewers may have considered it beneath the conversation. Doria herself may have drawn a line around certain subjects. Parents are not normally expected to publicly confirm their child's date of birth, and in most families, the idea of being asked to do so would seem absurd. But this is not most families. This is the most publicly scrutinized family on the planet. The debate about Meghan's age has been discussed in books, in courtrooms, in newspapers of record, and on platforms with millions of viewers. And the one person whose single sentence could end it all sat in front of cameras, said she was ready to talk, and was apparently never asked. That silence is the story. Not the documents, not the magazine. The silence. People often say the father would know. Thomas Markle, Meghan's father, has said publicly that he remembers the birth. He has described holding her as a newborn, said it was a cesarean delivery, and recalled the moment her hand wrapped around his finger. He was there. He remembers. For many people, that settles it. But here is where the discussion becomes more layered than a single memory, however vivid. A father's memory is one category of evidence. A mother's is another. And the difference in the eyes of many people following this debate is not about credibility in the personal sense. It is about the nature of the experience itself. Thomas Markle was in the room, Doria Ragland gave birth. The distinction matters because one is an observer, however close and however loving, and the other went through the physical, biological, unmistakable experience of labor and delivery. For many mothers, the age they were when they gave birth to their first child is as fixed and as retrievable a fact as their own name. And then there is the broader question of Thomas Markle's relationship with the truth as perceived by different audiences. He is a polarizing figure. Some people trust everything he says, others trust nothing. His public statements have been examined, questioned, and in some cases directly contradicted by other family members. Whether you find him reliable or not depends largely on where you already stand in this debate. But almost nobody disputes that Doria Ragland was in the delivery room. That is a shared fact across all versions of this story, and shared facts are the only ones worth building on. Now, I mentioned at the start that there is one quote from Meghan herself that rarely gets discussed in its full context, and this is the moment to bring it in because it takes on a different meaning once you have seen the full range of evidence. In 2015, years before she met Prince Harry, Meghan Markle sat for an interview promoting the legal drama Suits on the USA Network. During that conversation, she was asked about her age. Her response was this. She said that as women working in the entertainment industry, actors are often told they have a shelf life. She said she was always told not to say her age. And then she said, "I am 33. And I am really comfortable with that. If anyone has a problem, then it is their problem, not mine." That quote stands out for more than one reason. Most people who cite it focus only on the number, 33. They check it against 1981, confirm it works, and move on. But the broader point Meghan was making deserves attention because it opens a window into a world most people outside the entertainment industry never think about. She was describing an environment where women are actively pressured to hide their age, where agents, casting directors, and industry professionals routinely advise female actors not to reveal how old they are, where a woman's career opportunities can shrink based on a number rather than her talent. Meghan was not just sharing her age. She was pushing back against a system that incentivizes women in Hollywood to lie about it. That is the context that usually gets stripped away when only the number is quoted. Now, does that context prove anything about whether the number itself is accurate? No, it does not. But it does confirm that Meghan herself, years before she entered royal life, was aware of and commenting on an industry culture where age deception is not just common, but professionally encouraged. That is not an accusation. It is a description of the world she worked in for over a decade, and she said it herself, on the record, in her own words. There is another chapter in this family's relationship with birth timelines, and while I want to be absolutely clear that I am not discussing the children themselves, they are children, they did not choose any of this. The adults' own published accounts of events surrounding the birth of their first child have generated their own set of questions that people continue to debate. In Prince Harry's memoir, he described the birth of his son in detail. The account includes candles in the hospital room, Sanskrit chanting playing in the background, a photograph of Princess Diana placed nearby, reports of 2 epidurals administered during labor, and a departure from the hospital so rapid that, by Harry's own account, the family was back at Frogmore Cottage within approximately 2 hours of the birth. That timeline, especially the detail about leaving a central London hospital roughly 2 hours after delivery, sparked an enormous reaction. People with medical backgrounds questioned whether the sequence of events as described was consistent with standard postnatal care. One widely shared comment read, She gave birth in hospital at age 42 or 43 after 2 epidurals and was home in her bed 2 hours later. Really? That remark generated over 100 likes and prompted extensive discussion. Another commenter who claimed medical knowledge wrote that it is not possible to receive 2 epidurals during a single labor. Others focused on entirely different details, with one asking whether hospitals even allow patients to have lighted candles in their rooms, noting it seemed like a fire hazard. The published response to that question was that the candles were battery-operated, which only generated another round of debate about why anyone would think to pack battery-powered candles for a maternity ward. Now, I want to be precise about what I am saying here and what I am not. Prince Harry's memoir is a personal account. It reflects his memories, his experiences, and his perspective on events as he understood them. Like any autobiography, it is one source, it is valuable, it is worth reading. But it is not the same thing as an independent medical record, and some readers treat it differently because of that distinction. The point is not that the account is false. The point is that when people compare it with their own experiences, with standard medical protocols, and with the publicly available timeline, they find details that prompt questions rather than close them. And this is where I want to offer something that I have not seen anyone else lay out explicitly. Because this debate has been going on for years, and what strikes me most is not any single piece of evidence, but the way different types of evidence carry different kinds of weight, and the way the source with the most weight has been the least consulted. Think of it as a hierarchy. At the bottom, you have internet speculation, anonymous comments, unverified claims, interpretations of photographs. These are the least reliable sources, and anyone building a case exclusively on them is building on sand. One level up, you have published secondary sources, books by family members, biographies, newspaper investigations. These carry more weight because they are attributed, they went through some form of editorial process, and the authors attach their names and reputations to their claims, but they are still secondhand. They are people describing events they witnessed from the outside or heard about from others. Above that, you have legal documents and official records, court filings, birth certificates, government databases. These carry significant institutional authority. They are the foundation of the official timeline, and they deserve serious respect. But even official documents are created by humans, and as the fact-checkers themselves acknowledged, the details surrounding this family's timeline have not always been presented with complete consistency across every source. And at the very top of this hierarchy sits one category that outranks everything else: direct, first-hand, biological testimony from the person who gave birth, not someone who was in the room. Not someone who held the baby afterward, not a document filed by a clerk or a record entered into a database. The person whose body produced the child. That is the gold standard of evidence for the question of when a human being entered the world. And in this case, that person is Doria Ragland. And she has, as far as any publicly available evidence shows, never been asked the question on the record. That is what I find so remarkable about this entire debate. For years, people have argued over magazines and yearbooks and legal filings and emails and biographies. They have compared dates and counted years and pulled out calculators. And through all of it, the single most authoritative source of information on the central question has remained publicly silent. Not because she refuses all media contact, she has given interviews, not because she avoids personal topics, she has discussed deeply private matters on camera. But on the specific question of when her daughter was born, the public record appears to contain no direct statement from her. There is one more thread I want to pull, because it adds context to the timeline in a way that most people overlook. Doria Ragland's own educational history. A 1972 yearbook from Fairfax High School in Los Angeles contains a photograph of Doria as a sophomore, which is 10th grade in the American school system. Based on the structure of that school's yearbook, which reportedly included photographs of sophomores, juniors, and seniors, Sophomore appearing in the 1972 edition would logically have graduated around 1974. Based on her publicly reported birth date of September 6, 1956, Doria would have been 24 years old on August 4, 1981, turning 25 just a few weeks later. That is a straightforward calculation, and it lines up with the reported timeline. A published newspaper article from November of 2017, before Prince Harry and Meghan even announced their engagement, included what it described as enchanting high school photos of the woman who could become Prince Harry's future mother-in-law. The article placed Doria at Fairfax High School at age 16 in 1972, described her life as revolving around her studies, listening to music, and spending time with friends, and then noted that just 7 years later, she would fall in love with Thomas Markle, a handsome Hollywood lighting director 12 years her senior. That arithmetic tracks. 16 in 1972, 23 at the December 1979 wedding, 24 when her daughter was born in August of 1981. The numbers work. But the reason I bring this up is not to confirm the official timeline. It is to point out that Doria's own life chronology has been publicly reported in enough detail that any interviewer could have used it as a natural entry point. How old were you when you had Meghan? It is the most natural question in the world. Mothers are asked it constantly. It is not adversarial. It is not confrontational. It is the kind of question that appears in every parenting interview and every human interest profile. And yet, in the context of one of the longest-running public debates about a member of the royal family, it has apparently never been put to her. And you might be wondering why any of this matters at all. It is a fair question. People lie about their age, people round numbers, people make mistakes in emails and books and legal filings. Why does it matter if Meghan Markle's timeline contains a few inconsistencies? Here is why it matters, and this is the part that elevates this beyond gossip into something genuinely significant. Meghan Markle married into the British royal family. She became the Duchess of Sussex. She carried the title. She represented the institution, and the institution she joined operates on documentation, lineage, and precision. Birth dates are not casual details in the world of monarchy. They determine succession, they affect titles, they structure the official court circular. When you enter a family where the line of succession is determined by the order and timing of births going back centuries, the accuracy of your own birth date is not a trivial footnote, it is foundational. Beyond the institutional dimension, there is the personal one. Age affects medical timelines. It shapes how pregnancies are categorized. A woman giving birth at 37 is in a different medical category than a woman giving birth at 41. If the widely debated alternative timeline were true, and I am not saying it is, it would reframe not just a birthday, but a series of medical and personal milestones that have been part of the public conversation for years. And that is why the absence of Doria Ragland's public confirmation matters more than any single document. Because she is the one person who could end every question with a single answer. One sentence from the woman who was in the delivery room at West Park Hospital in Canoga Park, California, would carry more evidentiary weight than every magazine, every yearbook, every legal filing, and every biography combined. I want to step back and make one broader observation, because I think it connects to something about the way the Sussex story operates that most people feel but few articulate clearly. Throughout the public life of the Duke and Duchess of Sussex, there has been a recurring pattern. Information is presented. The public examines it. Inconsistencies appear. And instead of those inconsistencies being addressed directly, the conversation shifts to the motives of the people asking questions. Suddenly, the issue is not the discrepancy itself, but why anyone would dare to point it out. Critics are labeled haters. Journalists are accused of racism. Viewers who notice arithmetic errors in court documents are dismissed as conspiracy theorists. The result is that legitimate questions grounded in publicly available documents and simple mathematics, get buried under a layer of moral outrage designed to make the act of questioning itself seem illegitimate. But arithmetic does not have an agenda. A calendar does not have a bias. When Samantha's book says August 31st and the official record says August 4th, that is not hatred. That is a 27-day gap. When a legal filing says 17 years and the calendar says 16 years and 8 months, that is not a conspiracy. That is rounding. And when a fact-checking outlet writes that the ages in Meghan's own email were clearly slightly confused, that is not trolling. That is published analysis from a credentialed source. The people raising these questions are not, for the most part, making claims. They are comparing documents and finding that the documents do not perfectly agree. That is exactly what document analysis looks like. So here is where everything stands after the 45th birthday celebration. The official record exists and it says what it says. August 4th, 1981. That document is real, it is filed, and anyone can review it. At the same time, there is a book with a different date, a legal filing with a rounded age gap, an email with confused sibling ages, a magazine from 1997 with a 5-year discrepancy, a fact check that acknowledged inconsistencies, and a quote from Meghan herself given years before Prince Harry, in which she openly discussed the entertainment industry's culture of pressuring women to conceal their real age. Every single one of those details exists in the public record. None of them, individually, proves anything. But taken together, they explain why this conversation restarts every August and why it has never been put to rest. And through all of it, through every book and every filing and every comment section, the one voice that could silence every question has remained publicly unheard on this specific subject. Doria Ragland was in the delivery room at West Park Hospital in Canoga Park in the San Fernando Valley. She gave birth. She knows the date, not because she looked it up, not because someone told her, not because she read it in a filing. She knows because her body was there. And in all the years that this debate has raged, in all the interviews she has given, in the one where she sat in front of cameras and said she was ready to have her voice heard, nobody appears to have asked her the simplest question a mother can be asked. When was your daughter born? One answer, one sentence. From the one person who would know beyond any document, any filing, any magazine, any memoir. And that question, the easiest question in this entire saga, has apparently never been asked. The documents do not agree with each other. The family members tell different versions. The timelines contain gaps, but the woman who gave birth has never been publicly asked to confirm the date. And until she is, this conversation is not finished. It restarts every August because it has never actually ended. Not because people are obsessed, because the one answer that could end it has never been given. That is not a conspiracy. That is a question. And questions do not go away because you refuse to answer them.